If an alien comes out from under a rock and rides the rover, that would count as evidence too.
What does Neil actually think exists on Venus? Is he talking about aliens or some mysterious creatures hiding there? Or is it just speculation or a prediction? Plus, Neil mentioned something about biomarkers on Venus. What's up with that? With Neil's help, let's find out how this hellish planet, despite being 90% hotter than Earth, could still host life.
And the air is hotter, okay? The air is like 900 degrees Fahrenheit.
Venus is often dubbed as Earth's evil twin, but honestly, calling it a twin at all might be too kind. This place is more like Earth's estranged cousin who lives in a volcano. Neil deGrasse Tyson tells us it's not just hot, it's melt your face off, lead turning into liquid hot. The temperatures soar to a scorching 900 degrees Fahrenheit, and the pressure, it's over 90 times that of Earth, like hanging out deep in the ocean where even submarines think twice.
It's as hostile as it gets. It's much hotter than a pizza oven, if you want to actually do the math on that.
Neil has a knack for making the bizarre seem more relatable, and he nails it with the Venus analogy. Imagine your pizza oven at home. Now crank that image up to an inferno where no pizza has a chance to even see the 2-minute mark without turning to carbon.
So I calculate if it takes 15 minutes to cook a pizza and you do the fractions and you do this right. I did it. I got about 7 seconds.
Not just any pizza oven. We're talking about one dialed up to its fiery extreme. Pizzas don't just bake, they vanish. This isn't just to give us kitchen envy. It's to show how brutal Venus is. A spacecraft? Forget about it. It would have a shorter lifespan than the time it takes to snap a selfie. This stark reality paints a grim picture for space exploration. We like to think of habitable worlds as having comfy temperatures, breathable air, and a pressure that won't crush you like a soda can. Venus checks none of these boxes. Its blistering heat and crushing atmosphere turn it into an interplanetary oven from a nightmare. Through these extreme conditions, Venus becomes both a terror and a tantalizer. Clearly, no human can survive there. But then who or what could possibly have the guts to breathe in that atmosphere? Do the atmospheric gases on Venus have the ability to support life there?
Just to be clear, it's not just that they're weird gases, they're gases associated with the existence of life.
Here on Earth, we're all about oxygen and a few other gases that make life possible. Without them, we wouldn't be here, chatting about the mysteries of the universe. And despite the extreme face-melting heat on Venus, Neil deGrasse Tyson tells us they've found some pretty interesting gases there too. Nope, it's not oxygen. Get ready for this. It's called phosphine.
So these molecules, it's phosphine, which is phosphorus with 3 hydrogen atoms attached to it. That's known to be a product of life on Earth, life as we know it, that metabolizes not in the presence of oxygen. So anaerobic life, it's called collectively. You have it in your gut. It's in the gut of farm animals. It's a common phenomenon on Earth. And there aren't many other ways we can think to make it other than by the natural causes of being alive. And so they found a layer in Venus's atmosphere that's not so high temperature, not so high pressure, and it's sort of just right.
So researchers found phosphine up in the atmosphere of Venus, and it's shaking things up. This isn't just adding a new fact to Venus's resume. This could be a game changer, a hint that maybe, just maybe, there's something alive up there. Neil talks about a habitable zone up in those clouds. While Venus's surface could double as a stovetop, its upper atmosphere, at about 50 kilometers high, flips the script. The temperatures chill out and the pressures ease up, much like a nice spring day on Earth. Right there, phosphine pops up, waving a big flag that says, hey, maybe there's something going on here.
Extremophiles and alien worlds, one of my favorite subjects.
Ever heard of extremophiles? These tough little critters thrive in conditions that would send most organisms to their doom. Think about the bacteria partying in Yellowstone's hot springs, or the microbes chilling in the deep, dark pressure of ocean trenches. Here on Earth, life finds a way to not just survive, but thrive in the craziest spots. While chatting on Star Talk, Neil spoke to David Grinspoon, an American astrobiologist, who said,
clouds of Venus as a habitat. Now, it's true that clouds of Venus are more acidic than the places on Earth so far that we've found acid-loving organisms.
Even though Venus has a hotter, more acidic environment than we've seen Earthlings living in, these findings suggest that life isn't just limited to friendly, cozy conditions. Venus might not be so lifeless after all. But Neil doesn't just stop with extremophiles. He's hinting at something bigger. What else might be out there? Venus is keeping its secrets, but maybe not for long.
So these molecules that were discovered, they're called biomarkers. So until the day arrives where we have magic telescopes that can see to the surfaces of shrouded planets and watch for creatures crawling back and forth, until that day arrives, which may be never, we have to be satisfied with not finding life directly, but finding the signature of life, the biomarkers that betray the existence of life at anywhere else in the world.
Now here's a wild scoop from Neil deGrasse Tyson that'll make you lean in a bit closer. On Venus, there are these things called biomarkers. What are biomarkers, you ask? Well, they're like cosmic breadcrumbs that can show us signs of biological activities. Kind of like footprints that say, hey, something might be living here. Now, we don't have super-duper telescopes yet, or spaceships tough enough to handle Venus's sauna-like conditions, but we're not exactly in the dark ages. Thanks to some clever science and sharp math, we've spotted these biomarkers up there. And guess what? These could hint at the presence of life. Maybe not little green men or those big-eyed creatures from your favorite sci-fi flick, but something. Yeah, we've all seen those alien movies where they zip around in UFOs, munching on stuff that's definitely not your average veggie burger. But this isn't just make-believe or a storm in Neil's teacup. Scientists have really found something up there. There have been whispers of recently declassified photos. And get this, Venus isn't even supposed to be this sizzling hot plate. It's chilling closer to us than it is to Mars. So you'd think it'd be more on the pleasant side, right? But no, it's like the planet cranked its heater up to max and lost the dial. That's why the Soviet Union sent missions to check out what's really going on over there. And let me tell you, the stuff they found rocked Neil's world.
Oh, I'm completely surprised. I'm delighted and surprised.
Let me tell you more about the Soviet Union's not-so-secret obsession with Venus. You see, while the United States was busy aiming for the moon, the Soviets were casting their eyes on Venus, or as they call it, Venera. Back in the day, the Soviets were leading the space race with their Venera missions, which spanned from 1961 to 1983. This fixation on the fiery planet might sound a bit odd, but hey, space is full of surprises. There's a lot of speculation about why the Soviets were so enamored with Venus. Maybe they knew about life on that planet, or were they planning to use it as an unbeatable military base, or were they looking to colonize it after checking for life? It's a puzzle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. But let's dig into what we actually know. The Soviet Union didn't just dip their toes into Venusian exploration. They went all in. They didn't land on Venus once or twice, but launched 28 ambitious missions, with 13 penetrating the Venusian atmosphere and 8 making successful landings. These were no small feats. These missions positioned the Soviets as frontrunners in space exploration, way before NASA's affection for Mars took off. And guess what? Everything we know about these Venusian escapades comes from unarchived and declassified evidence of that time. Whatever Neil is now talking about came from the information they collected then. The Soviets were pretty tight-lipped about their space secrets, which makes the whole thing even more intriguing. Neil deGrasse Tyson, our favorite cosmic guide, was actually pretty stoked about the data coming from those missions. He mentioned how we often overlooked Venus in our search for life, focusing more on Mars. But there was a moment back in 1976 when Carl Sagan and his colleagues speculated about life forms thriving on Venus. Neil reflected on this, saying,
Completely surprised. I'm delighted and surprised because it was so easy to just write off Venus as, nah, it's still an interesting planet. But if you want to look for life, let's all look to Mars. So, but really, we should have known this earlier.
So while Venus might have been overshadowed by its cooler cousin Mars, it's clear that this hot planet still holds many secrets that might just change our understanding of where life could exist in the cosmos. Now, isn't that a quirky way to think about finding aliens?
Alien comes out from under a rock and rides the rover. That would count as evidence too.
When Neil deGrasse Tyson threw this out there, he wasn't just making a joke. He was actually pointing out a fascinating bit about our search for extraterrestrial life. It's true, we haven't seen any aliens zipping around on Venus, but Neil has a knack for making us think about the bigger picture. When asked specifically about the existence of aliens, Neil explained,
Our capacity to detect alien life with the crowdsourcing of eyes on Earth tells me that it's less convincing than ever before. Correct. And just because you see something in the sky and you don't know what it is, it does not mean that you know what it is.
What he's getting at is pretty smart. Just because people spot mysterious lights or strange objects in the sky doesn't automatically mean aliens or other humans are visiting us. There are no other species on Earth. People often jump to conclusions about UFOs, but seeing is not always believing, especially when it comes to the vast and mysterious universe. Now, regarding those potential Venusian aliens, Neil suggests that if there are aliens, they might be way smarter than us. Why? Because managing to survive and thrive on a planet as harsh as Venus would require some seriously advanced adaptability and intelligence. If these aliens exist, they probably don't need to zip over to Earth for a visit. They've got their own gig going on Venus, and according to Neil, they'd be quite the sophisticated bunch, knowing more about the cosmos than we can imagine. So, while it's fun to imagine an alien popping out to say hi on Venus, Neil's comments remind us to keep our imaginations in check with a good dose of scientific skepticism. After all, the search for alien life is as much about finding actual evidence as it is about debunking the myths and misinterpretations that come along for the ride.
So Venus is not very far away. In fact, among all planets, it gets the closest to us. So relative to other missions in the solar system, a Venus mission is relatively cheap.
But think about this. Can we visit Venus more openly and extensively? Historically, Soviet missions like Sputnik were shrouded in secrecy, and they haven't shared all the juicy details yet. Meanwhile, the rest of the world has been pretty focused on Mars and the Moon. But now, Neil deGrasse Tyson is shaking things up by suggesting that heading over to Venus might not be as tough as we thought. And guess what? Visiting Venus won't break the bank like some other space adventures might. It's like finding a budget travel deal, but for space exploration. And with Neil pointing out how close and accessible Venus is, it's like discovering that a neighbor's house has some fascinating secrets just waiting to be explored. Now, after discovering biomolecules on Venus, Neil says it's time to level up our curiosity.
In a position to ask the next round of questions. What could possibly be causing it? How would it be sustained? How would you go into the atmosphere? Don't go too deep because you could vaporize your craft. You want to sort of skim into the atmosphere, possibly bring back samples to return. If they're microbes, you'd want to sort of capture them and bring them back to our labs. It's not realistic to send an orbiting lab to Venus, not at least at this stage of our spacefaring prowess.
So, the game plan. We skim through just the right part of Venus's atmosphere, scoop up some samples, careful not to dive too deep, or we'll toast our spacecraft, and maybe catch some of those elusive microbes. The goal is to bring back these cosmic souvenirs to Earth so we can study them up close and personal in our labs. Neil's basically outlining a space heist, except instead of jewels, we're after alien microbe samples. Could Neil be onto something? Did the Soviet Union stumble upon actual evidence of aliens, which is why they kept their Venus missions under wraps? What's your take on this cosmic mystery? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and let's see how many space detectives we have.